They might be self-aware.
Welcome back. Another episode of They Might Be Self-Aware. How goes it?
It goes well. I'm Daniel Bishop, one of your co-hosts, and maybe I'm self-aware.
I am Hunter Powers, your other co-host, and definitely not self-aware, but we're working on it.
Self-aware, self-evident, self-visible. I feel like I'm having some trouble seeing you. Granted, we're going to have to be very descriptive for the people who are listening to this, but you seem to be a lot holier than usual. There's a
What's the thing? There are people that are afraid of holes, right? Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, tryptophobia, I think it's called.
Yeah, so I thought I would trigger. We should have a trigger warning for all.
Okay, sure.
Tryptophobics, something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
What am I looking at, Hunter?
You know, even I don't know, but it felt a little self-aware when I was doing it. We do have a sponsor this episode. This episode is brought to you by Dongwon Jinglong's food grade glycine. It's suitable as a flavor enhancer, sweetener, and nutritional supplement.
What?
Yeah, those who know. But welcome. It's episode 9 already. We've done 9 of these things, and I don't know, we're still here.
We're already getting big name sponsors. This is incredible.
It's pretty, it's all happening as we chart AI's collision course with humanity's future. Because what else are we supposed to do?
Scream into the void, which is what we're doing here today. Well, maybe not screaming, metaphorically screaming.
The thing that I recently discovered, we cover a lot of AI-related news here, but there's some now suggesting that perhaps that news is in fact just written by the AI, and it's turtles all the way down.
The Ouroboros was bound to start eating its own tail at some point. As soon as any of these tools, but like a ChatGPT, for example, as soon as any of those come out and they start being indexed on the internet, any other web scraper for any subsequent efforts are going to be grabbing some of those AI generated things. It was inevitable.
Yeah, they did a survey of writers for the Associated Press, a very reputable and probably the largest newswire, and if not, like right there at the top. And 70% of them are very actively using AI tools to write their stories. And we may be generous, in that description, opposed to just saying, yeah, first draft, here's 3 points, write me a story. Not to say I've ever done that, by the way. But apparently our Associated Press is indeed doing that.
I'm not surprised. I think we're getting out of the hype realm. Not entirely, for sure. But AI, LLMs, Gen AI, NLP, whatever you want to call it. All of these things aren't just hype anymore. We are now getting into so there are these tools, how do we actually integrate them into our daily lives? We discovered the hammer and we didn't really know what nails were for a while. And now we're starting to see what's vaguely nail-shaped. And I need to write a news article and I have a bunch of facts about what the article will be. Please put this into a draft form. Hopefully draft. Maybe it's just making the entire article sometimes. But make this into a rough draft for me. Is that any different from using a pottery wheel to take unshaped clay and make it into vaguely the shape that you want? I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but it's not that much of one, right? Sure, the medium is very, very different.
It's just different because
we're using it as a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the future, I agree that that's how we will look back on it. I don't know if you've also seen newsrooms sort of updating their Gen AI policies over the last year, which tends to start with, we will not use any AI anywhere in any of our articles. And then we will sometimes look at it, but it will not actually write anything in the articles. And then some articles may be written, but we will disclose when we are using it. Disclose part goes away. And you do see these evolutions of their, AI policies. I don't know. I'm not going to call it companies. There are very specific companies, large media companies that have had these rapidly iterative AI policies. And in this recent study, I also discovered that about half newsrooms yet don't have AI policies, even though the data is starting to suggest that the majority of them are very actively using it to craft their news stories.
I'm not surprised. A newsroom is not a secret clearance facility. They don't have to worry about accidentally disclosing state secret mostly, usually. Maybe there's the occasional odd or end of we got this classified and we're just reporting on it. I don't know, but they're dealing with literally different data. And I think from use policies at the national level, at the state level, at the company level, because a lot of newsrooms are also owned by 1 or 2 companies anyways,
yes,
all the way up at the top. I would expect many of those to eventually align under one large company policy. But then for right now, if it's still full Wild West rules, everyone's kind of making it up as they go, it probably comes down to just who's in charge of that particular newsroom and if they personally feel it's a good tool to use or not. And it'll stay that way until it solidifies.
We have a problem in this country and perhaps most countries with at least the concept of fake news. I think different people differ on to what degree they believe there is or is not fake news. Everyone probably agrees there's a little bit. Some people think there's a whole lot. Does this help that or does this hurt that? Is this just like
Hurt.
meh?
I'm generally speaking, I think we can look back at history and our previous 8 or so episodes and see that I'm fairly bullish on this kind of technology. I'm in the field. I like it. I'm very excited about all of these things that are coming out. Also, it will be our undoing or our near undoing before we maybe rapidly change course. And it started with semi-benign things like there's plenty of Facebook spam that's mostly designed for like older folks of just like, here's a cute picture of a cat next to an ice sculpture of the same cat. And like, it was made by Midjourney or something. Yesterday, I saw an old-timey photo from London and it was AI generated. They're getting so good that you do have to look closely to tell, but like, oh, that horse doesn't have any legs. Oh, looking at a real picture from this bridge, that's not what the skyline quite looks like. Or it's a more modern skyline than would have existed at that time. And like, we're getting into a realm where that becomes harder and harder and harder. And that's just Facebook memes.
Yeah.
We're absolutely going to get to the point where President Biden is waving a, very bad flag or holding up a picture of a very naughty thing or whatever. And that will spread like wildfire. We'll see, because he was holding this, we should such and such. And like, it's already happening at least a little, and it's going to keep happening more because we're in an election cycle. And it'll keep happening more after that because the technology is caught up and people will notice that it gets results. I'm sad about that, but
well, we've been keeping the list of jobs remaining for us humans, and I guess that the journalism job, we haven't crossed it completely off, but the line has begun, and it is inching over.
Are we making more jobs in misinformation at the expense of real information jobs?
I
Because
don't
more of
know.
it's being generated, and someone has to hit enter on the thing until they get the right post that's going to subvert Western capitalism or whatever.
On the misinformation trend, I feel like we're rapidly moving towards the community notes model where all of the humans, after the thing is written, can come in and add their own sort of 2 cents, and the largest agreement is added there as a note. Hey, here's what us humans think about this.
Is that democracy? Is that like a neo-democracy where we're just going to leave the community notes section and the kind of collective consensus around a thing is the closest that we have to being in control of ourselves at that point?
Until the AI takes it over. The community
yes,
notes
that's right.
it's just down there a little bit further on the list before it starts.
It's just training data for the LLM at
getting
that point.
crossed.
Yeah.
Next up on the list, potentially, though, teachers. And there was another study done where they interviewed a number of teachers and found that teachers are starting to use tools like ChatGPT to grade a lot of their schoolwork. That they are frequently pasting essays into something like a ChatGPT and saying, "Why don't you tell me some critiques that would be good for this essay, and how might they make this essay better?" So there's a joke there that the essay may have originated from something like a ChatGPT to begin with.
Yep. I think that second half is something there's not a good solution for. The first half, I'm 1,000,000% in favor of. Teachers are overworked. They have too many students. They're having to work outside of work hours on all this extra stuff. To completely not even touch on pay. I think teachers 100% absolutely should be making every use possible out of LLMs to finish up with grading or to help make lesson plans, all these kinds of things. This is one of the better net positive for society gains that I see coming from this technology. I can also see it still being abused to like, now we only need one teacher for 100 students. Hopefully it doesn't go that way. But making teachers' lives easier and more productive via a tool like this that can, look, pre-LLMs, there were still things like Grammarly, which would, take a look at your whatever you put into it and tell you if you're screwing up your grammar. Before that, we had the little red squiggle under Microsoft Word. These kinds of tools have existed for a long time. They're just getting better. 1,000,000% think that we should be using those as much as possible.
Do you think the teacher should have to disclose anytime that they're using these tools, or they don't have to disclose when they look something up in the dictionary? Do they have to disclose when?
Do they have to disclose that they're... I feel like maybe saying, hey, you're going to have to use Turnitin and we're going to check for plagiarism. I don't know if they have to, or just the fact that you're uploading it there as the student, that it's going to. I don't know how I feel about having to disclose it. I do think it should be used, and maybe, why not make the students aware, but also, do you tell the students that you're going to use a calculator to check their whatever work?
I remember in college, in CS classes, a lot of that grading was automated automated, where you'd have to submit code and they would have a series of automated tests. Then you didn't know what the tests were that would test whether your code was working with all these kind of weird edge cases, and it would give you back your grade. Now, if I'm recalling correctly, we were allowed to submit early and get a grade back early, and then we could resubmit our work, but there was like a limit on it. It was like you can submit up to 3 times before the deadline if you want to get early feedback on your code, but you can't kind of brute force what a solution might be. But it does potentially, something like this does potentially add more learning opportunity for the student. If okay, you can here's our grader, and the deadline's, I don't know, October 1st, and you can submit up to 3 times before that, and you'll get feedback each of those times if you do.
Okay, so that leads me down a very interesting thought hole. I don't care for that phrasing. In college, professors have office hours. Yep. Maybe not all of them, probably most to all of them. And that's when you're supposed to go by and say, hey, so there's this, you gave us this semester-long project, and here I'm looking for help, or I need help with this specific concept or with this homework. I guess in like elementary school through high school, you don't really have that available, but is that kind of tied into let's say I'm writing an essay and I'm actually writing it. We're going to ignore the ethical concerns and the, allure of just using an LLM for it. But let's say I, Daniel, write an essay and it's a first draft and I know it's kind of rough and here's the instructions and here's what I've been working on. And then I put that into ChatGPT. That should be fine to have it critique me and use that feedback to myself write more. Again, I know not everyone would actually do the writing themselves, actually make the edits. We can go back to the newsroom thing. All of these kinds of discussions of like, do you use it wholesale or use it as inspiration, which would be the idea. Surely that's fine, right? You're just asking someone, even if the someone isn't a real person, and we can get into that in a little bit more. Surely it's okay to use advice regardless of what thing or person generated it to make your writing better.
I think it depends upon what the feedback looks like. Going back to college again, I may or may not remember that as part of every college admission, you had to write essays, and you needed to write the essays. You weren't allowed to have someone else write it, and there were some language there about how heavily someone else can potentially edit it. But there were these services, these individuals out there. So you could pay I want to say like $600-ish to someone in grad school at Harvard who would read your essay and critique it. And if you followed the feedback from that person at Harvard, your essay really did go up like 25 notches, whatever a notch is. And so that, it's like, to what degree are you just kind of telling me the answer versus, this is unclear? Is it just like a circle and this is unclear? Or is it, here are 10 facts you should consider adding to this area, and maybe shift the whole sort of tone of it over to this? It's that, that's where the potential for plagiarism comes in the level of feedback and how copy and paste it is.
Well, it's got to be as ethically wrong to do the copy paste or the nearly copy paste from ChatGPT as it is to paying a bunch of money to a grad student.
It's the same.
It's the same problem. But also, people use tools, whether it be paying a person, using an LLM, using a hammer to build a house instead of trying to put together it like completely by scratch. We use tools to make our lives easier, better, more likely to succeed at tasks. I do think that there are these problems. I don't want to wash that away at all, but I see 0% chance that this is ever going to get clawed back. We have to just learn to adapt to that.
I was on a panel recently of other AI leaders, and one of the things we were talking about is companies' sort of prohibitive policies about the use of these tools. And, companies, you can't use this tool, you can't use that tool, here are all the different rules, suggestions. It's almost like in the future, we'll look back on this as though you're not allowed to use the spell checker, right? Like, no, I don't want you using that spell checking. Like, it's just kind of silly. It's you can't use a calculator. Okay, maybe in education, there are certain times when we're trying to learn fundamentals. Fundamentals don't have inherent value. The act of learning how to learn them potentially does have value. But pretending that you won't have a calculator for the rest of your life, that's all we're doing now. We're pretending that you won't have a large language model for the rest of your life. You are. You're going to have one. Was it Humane just finally there? You can have one in a little pendant right on your shirt.
I don't know if anyone is going to. I don't know if you just saw the review of that or not.
Yeah, I'm someone who buys everything. Even I didn't buy it. I still have that other one. I forgot what it's called. It hasn't. I got like a notice about it potentially shipping. It was designed by Teenage Engineering, though it's not a Teenage Engineering device. I don't know. But yeah, the humane one, I watched a lot of the videos and I just like, I just can't imagine one thing I would do with it. And it seems too slow. If it was super fast, that's the missing component for me on the humane pen. I hate that lag that it has. And it has real lag.
I think they're going for kind of a Her style experience, something like the movie Her, where the guy has, what is it, Joaquin
Phoenix?
Yeah. So right, he's got the phone like in his pocket, and so the camera's pointing it out, and AI can see the world around him. Surely that's what they're going for, and we're just not at that level yet. But, and I might have mentioned this last time we talked, I went on a nature walk with ChatGPT. Have we talked about this yet?
No.
Okay,
No, you told me something out of the podcast, but you never told me any details.
Okay, great. So let's go into this for a second. This is what I think the humane folks really want as like a potential future, because this was a stellar use case of the technology. It was just the ChatGPT app on my phone where you can hit like a little, it looks like a pair of headphones icon. And basically you just go into a conversation with it. Instead of just dictating and you see the text or whatever, it's just a little floating blob and it listens to what you say and then it sends that and then it speaks it back. And it does a pretty good job making it sound like it's an actual voice on the other end of the line. It's clearly robotic, but it adds in like natural sounding stutters or like, oh, did the signal drop for like a tenth of a second? Was that it being clever and making it sound like that? So it sounds like you're on a phone call with somebody, basically. And I'm on a nature walk and I'm in Texas and it's April and all the wildflowers are out. It's beautiful, and I don't know anything about flowers. So I use the Seek app by iNaturalist. You should all get it. It's like a real-life Pokedex. I love it. I open up the Seek app. I take a picture of a flower. Oh, Texas paintbrush. I wonder what that is. And there is a link in the app to the Wikipedia page, but I want to be looking at the nature around me. So I flip over to the GPT app and I say, I'm in Texas. It's April. I just saw some flowers that are called the Texas paintbrush. Can you tell me about them? And then it just starts talking. And having checked it later, it was correct about basically everything. And it was most of the same kind of information that you could find on like Wikipedia and one or two other pages like about it. But it did a good job collating all that information over the course of a 2-minute rant on it, not rant, a discussion on its end. And then it just goes back to listening. Hey, I just saw this big black butterfly that I couldn't get a picture of, but here's kind of the description. Oh, it might be a such and such swallowtail, whatever. And I had a half hour back and forth with ChatGPT out on a nature walk, and I'd swap back and forth to the camera thing on Seek, and I'd take a picture of some weird fuzzy caterpillar that I saw. Oh, that's the salt marsh moth's caterpillar, and it's such and such. And like, that's the promise of the technology. That was incredible because it was like having a moderately capable nature guide with me on this walk. And I was walking my dogs and just like, I had a fantastic time. That was awesome. That's what Humane wants, but instead, I don't think they're there yet. The reviews were not terribly kind.
I don't know if you saw, it's not one of our stories, but Apple's been working on their AI. They've famously been behind the bell curve.
They were trying with a car for a while.
In AI. For a long time, they also didn't want to use the words AI or ML. Well, they used ML, I guess, a fair number of times, but they sort of avoided it. But they've just been called out for it so much, and Siri is so bad. But supposedly, this year for Apple is going to be the year of AI. Large announcements at WWDC coming up in just I think it's like 2 months.
Just to be clear, you're saying Apple,
yes,
for some reason didn't want to use a widely used term, a standard that basically the rest of the world uses for something. I'm shocked. You're saying that like the rest of the world's got USB-C and they've got their nonsense connectors, or
you have
the rest
your
of the
VR
world's got
headsets,
such and such,
and I have my Vision Pro.
I have VR and AR. We have spatial computing.
Spatial computing.
You're saying Apple isn't calling AI because they want their own special term for it? I'm shocked.
Well, they seem to have come around on a little bit, but there's some, I don't know, we'll call it leaks, but also I think they're publishing some stuff that they've suggested that their latest model in the latest training batch is now besting GPT-4 on device. And so I wonder
a bold claim
if that Her future, like that's what stops for me. Like I think the tech is good enough to give you a Her like experience, but I can't actually have a conversation, or it's not a real conversation. It's a let me talk and then let me pause and then let me wait for however long you want to talk, and then I'll talk back. But if it's super fast, all on device,
a GPT Turbo style experience where you've got like a second before it starts talking to you.
That could be in our very near future. And if you haven't seen Her, I would recommend it. I watched it again very recently on the Apple Vision Pro in a very large screen. Joaquin Phoenix, Scarlett Johansson, a Spike Jonze film. Definitely recommend. But back to our teachers. There were some more teachers, or I guess it's the Texas Education Agency, They're spilling the tea on AI, and apparently setting up a new system for automated grading. I guess this is your concern that, okay, great, we're going to use the AI to grade things, but maybe that's now not, we don't need teachers for that, we're going to cross that part off of their responsibilities. Grading is going to become standardized. We already have the concept of standardized grading. We all take standardized tests. We don't think that a human is recording those. I guess some of the essays get looked at by a human previously, but in the future not. But we do understand the concept of an automated grader. The AI grading system.
This isn't an all or one though, right? The article mentioned that they're going to have humans look over a significant portion of them, at least presumably to start, and they're going to especially look at the ones where the AI says, "I don't know." And I think an "I don't know" response from AIs, from LLMs, from whatever, is very important. You don't want to say to the AI, always make a decision no matter what, because there's a zillion edge cases. There's infinite edge cases. If the AI does a good job of saying, I'm not sure in this case, have a human look at it, like I feel way more comfortable about that.
I think I feel comfortable about it for objective questions and answers. And I feel uncomfortable about it with subjective questions and answers. And my concern is that how will it ever, grade brilliance? How does it not just sort of push everyone towards a very boring medium? Whereas the teacher can recognize, wow, that was something super creative, a creative way of thinking about it and answering it that was not at all what I was expecting, versus I imagine the AI, because it just won't have enough training data for that. With enough training data, arguably it could recognize, hold on a second, I want to flag this person. Maybe they belong in a gifted program or something of that nature. But I can't imagine it's anything more than just, making everyone sound the same.
Yeah. I'm thinking less of America and more of places like India or China, where there are, plenty of pictures online of like these gigantic halls full of a gazillion students that all have to do extremely well, or their lives are imperiled. If they don't get into the top school, that's it. There have to already be presumably a whole army of people who are doing the grading of these tests. And we've talked a little bit about like AI judges and so on. Isn't this kind of the same thing as a judge at that point? You're taking a bunch of data about a thing. You're coming to a conclusion. This person is or isn't worthy. This person is or isn't deserving X number of years in prison. This person is or isn't such and such. And you're right. Like there's the training data problem. There's not recognizing brilliance, but for that middle part of the bell curve, and probably identifying the bottom of the bell curve as well. Like this is clearly not what we were asking for. I think those should be easy enough to find enough of the time, but the concern's a very valid one of we're going to see some people fall through the cracks. My question is it more or less people than already do fall through the cracks? Because there's sort of this underlying base assumption. AI isn't as good as people. And in many cases, much of the time, that's definitely the case. But one thing it can do well is be consistent. And so I've worked with human annotators before when we worked together and at previous jobs. They're not 100% right. No annotator is 100% right 100% of the time. I've re-annotated data that I've looked at multiple points and disagreed with myself. And that's on a binary classification task when it comes to weird edge case stuff. I don't think there's as much as we are, it might feel icky. I don't think there is this is a good essay. 100% of the time, 100% of people would say, yes, absolutely this. And taking that out of human hands feels bad and wrong, and we will miss some people, but we would have probably missed about as many people otherwise. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I feel.
I think I agree with you. And thinking about it a little bit, I can imagine like there being a sort of first step to it where it does try to place you on that bell curve. We can just, a simplified version of it is, what grade level do I imagine this person is on? I'm going to predict their grade level without knowing their grade level to begin with. Like this feels like it's a high schooler. Oh, this feels like a third grader. And perhaps having that information would help flag for the educators that, hey, but this person's in 6th grade and the AI just flagged it as, I feel like I'm talking with a 3rd grader here, needs to happen. Or I feel like I'm talking with someone who's a junior in high school and they're only in 6th grade. Hey, this is an individual that, again, also needs some special attention just in a different way.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be an LLM says this person passes or not. It can be, this is the grade level. Here's how complex the vocabulary is. And there are plenty of non-ML type solutions.
Yeah.
The Flesch Kincaid score, yep. I have no idea how the heck it works, but like add all of those things together and you have a more robust system.
Right,
I think
like reading level.
The headline, Texas is replacing thousands of human exam graders with AI, is flashy. It's going to get a lot of clicks. I sincerely hope the actual solution is it's basically 30 of these little systems working together that eventually collates down to a recommend fail pass. And all but one of those tools probably already was being used. I think.
Yeah.
And if not, it's a logical assumption that something like that could exist.
Combined with the fact that we already have have so much automated grading that we accept that everyone who goes through the education system already gets automatically graded a whole bunch.
The same thing as the self-driving car.
Which you could argue is AI.
If we get to a point where, less people who would have hit someone drunk driving, like that happens less often, less people die overall. That seems like a net positive, even if some people would still get hurt. We're never going to get 100 because we couldn't get 100 with people, and we can't agree on what 100% would even look like. Hopefully we can get up to a high enough level where, these bad edge cases are few and far between.
Speaking of the AI grading our writing and shaping the minds of our youth, another issue that's come up recently is there are more and more completely AI generated books on the internet. I don't think that's a shock to anyone, but Google has started indexing these books as real books by notable authors, and is then leveraging the information in these books, which was just generated by AI, as part of its search responses and saying, hey, here's a potential answer to your query on food grade glycine. And the synthetic data is running amok.
I think so. We talked a little bit about that earlier. I think the problem is not that this is being like indexed. It's part of the internet. Google indexes the whole damn thing. I get it. Google indexes the whole darn thing. I think the problem isn't with it being indexed onto the internet. The problem is with anyone using that as training data for their own AIs in the future, because there have been a bunch of papers that have come out, maybe some of which were written or partially written by AI, that say having training data, having an AI, and then training it more on synthetic data tends to get into this catastrophic loop of like, it will just degrade in terms of performance. You need real people. You need real text, real audio, real whatever, real data from real people. So the way that I see this is there's going to be, there's steel. It seems like a hard left. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I think it's steel in the United States that was pre the atomic bomb. And that's used and like dug up from wrecks at the bottom of the ocean, and very precious because it's used in these very high precision types of environments because of the very, very, very small amount of nuclear contamination that just like got into the air around the world and settled sort of into everything. But steel made before that has 0% of that. We're going to see the same sort of thing where there's like this almost layer in the strata of the internet of everything was generated, or nearly everything was generated by people, or something that could be easily identified as like was by people. And then now it isn't. And everything before then has already been indexed. There's like large language dumps out there on the internet that are used for training these things. All of that will become more and more valuable of, can we be sure that everything that we're training a new model on was in the pre-times? And more data has been going onto the internet for a very long time. And so there's more and more data to train your LLMs on. Now there isn't. I think like we're going to have to be really, really careful. The people who are making these things, will have to be very, very careful going forward to say we can't use this stuff after this point, because you can't trust it as was actually written by a person, and therefore the LLM, which is trying to emulate what people sound and type and look like, can't use that data. So we've reached a threshold where that's it. Stuff that was on the internet, it was all of that stuff in the pre-times, and now you have to get your own data somehow. Is it using ChatGPT where it saves the logs? Is it you get the service for free as long as you wear the Humane pin and it can listen to your conversations in real life? Is it something else? I think we're going to see people finding ways to get more real information as the next gold rush for data.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to come from observing humans.
Yeah.
Because there really is no more data, old data, for them to consume, and the new data that's going online is corrupted and will become increasingly corrupted by the synthetic data, which a lot of it is distinguishable today, but not all of it. And there's really no reason to think that we will be able to distinguish in the future between synthetic and real data.
Got a thought. So if you want to take video of someone outside, in many jurisdictions, there's like no expectation of privacy. You're allowed to take video
Public
of a cop
property.
doing an arrest. You're allowed to, whatever. You can, maybe you're not allowed to or not supposed to upload like video of people without their consent. But I think in a lot of places that's basically fine.
Yeah, does that mean a First Amendment right?
Yeah. Does that mean that you could set up a bunch of microphones around a city that are just streaming to the cloud and isolating voices and trying to like get snippets of conversations to the point where you have a tremendous amount of real spoken stuff by people?
I mean, well, first off, law enforcement already does this.
Sure.
in a lot of cities, and
I
even in
imagine it's
smaller
more
cities,
video,
they usually
but
have some
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
I think they have audio too.
Probably.
I think there are issues around can they just listen in to all the audio, but. But your point is there like a company, like is there a commercial use case for I'm going to go around to all businesses and I want to put a box in here, and this box is going to be a video feed and it's going to listen to conversations, but we're going to scrub all PII from it, from your perspective.
Sure. Names will
and
be
I'll
redacted.
pay you whatever, $50 a month, $100 a month, $1,000 a month, whatever the number is. Just install this little box in your premise.
Every Starbucks across the nation has now got a listening box, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes. Seems inevitable.
I think we'll probably see something like that. But the point being here, Google, they're indexing all this stuff that will become increasingly less good to use as training data. Probably already is just straight up bad and you shouldn't and can't use it anymore. And since there are plenty of tools that say this is or isn't AI, and they're not good, unless we can get those good, you just can't use data after that. You just can't use data after that point. So where do you find more data in the real world?
One of the conversation threads I've been involved in recently is around the shift to these humanoid robotics and why are all these companies pushing for it so much. One of the beliefs is that we want to build humanoid robotics so that we can start leveraging more training data from video of humans, that we can watch how humans are performing tasks, how humans are interacting, how humans are solving problems, and we will be able to feed that, we'll be able to leverage that data, feed those video streams into a model to then teach the robots how to do things. And it's another, like, we just don't have any more training data, but what if every video was training data for how to engage in these different scenarios and solve problems and then eventually solve them better?
I'm astonished that Amazon isn't making its warehouse workers use mocap suits at this point. And I mean that fully. Like, just, I don't know if it has to be the big, like, golf ball type things hanging off of everyone's suit, but just to have some points on a person so that they could have, I'm sure there's a million cameras all around these facilities. If you've got a whole bunch of workers in a whole bunch of these warehouses doing the same kind of tasks, you could be getting a zillion data points per day by having, you know, enough cameras to get a 3D point cloud photogrammetry, whatever you want to call it, of this is where all the bend points on a person are and how it moves. There's where you get your more data, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it suggests that the technology just isn't quite there yet. It's too speculative. We're too far from that precipice to make it worth that investment. Another thing has been suggested before, that how the transition will look like is one day Amazon will tell all of its workers that now you all work from home and we have the robots in the warehouse and you're just going to drive the robots remotely. You know, you'll drive it, find the stock, pack the boxes, and you're just sitting at home with your PS4 controller fulfilling orders. But then that would be, you know, just pure training data, and easier training data to capture and to model than your mocap suit.
So you just need the robot to be good enough to be controlled via a controller, is what you're saying.
PS4. It's all just a video game.
Specifically PS4.
It's a good controller. I don't know if you have a more favored controller, but yeah.
I mean,
it's the one
N64. I'm kidding. What a controller
right?
design.
It's like big gray plastic, but you kind of held it like this.
And there's the 3 handles, and so pick
thing
2.
in the middle. That's why I was like, yeah, we're out here. There's the one in the middle. Oh, is it you could get like you go back and forth sort of a little bit?
Yeah, right.
That was a little while.
Well, rather than a controller, I mean, VR, right? Put on your VR headset, you're looking through the robot's eyes. If you could get the lag short enough, I think it probably wouldn't make too many people too motion sick. And then you've got your motion controller, hand, whatevers, and you could use those to mimic picking things up, putting them down. I suppose it would be easier if you could just turn it down to a hold X while looking at the box, and then it'll grab it or whatever.
Factory workers on the list. Again, they seem like someone, because we have a lot of robots in factories today, but for some reason it doesn't feel like we're not on the precipice. It doesn't feel like a year from now there'll be 25% less factory workers for some reason. There's something there. There's some bit of technology we just haven't quite reached.
Well, if you look at assembly lines for cars, that's something that the average person would imagine, surely that could just be automated, right? And they super duper aren't. And boy, companies have been trying very hard since the very first production line to make this as few people as possible. And you can have all the robot arms in the world, and you still can't take people out of that. I think we might be able to automate most of AI grading, or, you know, making lesson plans, or indexing books, making bad books, whatever you want to call it. All of that can be kind of torn away because it doesn't involve a body. But then once you get into this embodiment, that's still early stages stuff. And I think, we're not going to see that go away. Even like self-driving cars, because that's just the car with its own control over the wheels or something. But something about the locomotion aspects of a human body walking around the world. It makes it a lot tougher.
And that's why we're trying to build the AI robots.
Yeah.
So that they can solve that final last mile problem.
So part of that is that walking around on two legs is inherently a little less stable than like a four-legged creature. So maybe instead of a two-legged humanoid robot, people will start with like, there are already first-person view things for like quadcopters. You could probably do that for like treaded and tanked things. There's the Boston Dynamics robot, like the dog that you might be able to put a camera on top of and remote that around. But if you start looking at like these different form factors, that opens up different stuff that people straight up can't or couldn't or wouldn't do before. Fitting through small spaces with a tiny little spider robot to like go find people who got trapped in a mine collapse or something. I feel like there's a lot more opportunities to enable people via robotics to do things that straight up weren't doable before. Maybe hanging from the ceiling or being in, you're hanging off of a crane to do some specific kind of maintenance, which would be wildly difficult and dangerous before. All of a sudden via like these telepresence things. You mentioned that for factory workers or warehouse workers, but what about like safety folks? What if you could have a robot that runs into a burning house that's burning to the point where a firefighter would never go in, but you still could save people if you wouldn't burn up? And then you have the robot go in and it's shooting out fire retardant foam out of it from zillion nozzles and grabs somebody and brings them out. Like that seems like a potential huge benefit to these kinds of technologies.
Have you seen RoboCop?
I've seen RoboCop. I've seen iRobot. I love the "you are having an accident" person getting like pulled out of the car. I do think that we're going to get to that sort of future. And maybe we start with a person at home wearing a headset saying "you're having an accident" as they direct the robot to pull the person out of the burning vehicle or whatever. But yeah, we'll probably get there where it does it on its own.
So a lot of this is about capturing the training data. And that's where we see gaps in AI today. It's most likely because we don't have the data necessary. It's less likely that we just don't have the raw compute power to do it. I think eventually we get to the compute power problem.
Yeah, data and compute.
Much data.
And algorithms are getting better too. But like it's all of the different ends.
There's a new bill making its way through Congress that would require disclosure of any copywritten works in your training data. Now, again, only things that have a copyright. So synthetic data or first-party data that you went out and recorded or collected, that would not be copywritten data, but anything that did have a copyright on it. So if you're training on every book that's ever been published, you would need to disclose it. It doesn't necessarily say that that's illegal, just that you have to be transparent about the nature, the source of your data when you are leveraging data that is not yours.
Now, if you have to do it for every individual piece, I think that's where it becomes an intractable problem, because these large dumps of the whole internet from a certain point, or here's this set of a zillion books, a bunch of those probably have some pirated stuff in them or accidentally pirated. Or if you think about it, the internet's a big place. Let's say we're looking at Star Wars. So the first Star Wars Episode 4, the first one that came out I think I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I really should know the date off the top of my head. It's somewhere in the 70s, right? The entire thing is probably available in snippets on YouTube. The entirety of the script of that almost certainly has been talked about, quoted, whatever, over the entire course of the internet. Does that mean, because you can have a quote and it's not like I'm at odds with Lucasfilm for copyright because I said use the Force, but if you have use the Force and then another quote, Luke, comma, whatever, and then, no, I am your father. Again, that's one of those quotes that I should really have off the top of my head. All of these individual pieces could probably be streamed together and like recreate effectively the source material, even if you didn't have a copy of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
So basically it's the fair use argument.
Yeah.
I can say 2 words. Argument? Can I say 3 words? Can I say 4 words? Can I say a few lines? And then fair use often comes down to the context.
Right.
And the impact it has back on the original. Like if by you saying, Luke, I am your father, no one is ever going to go see another Star Wars film ever, then maybe it wasn't fair use, your application there. But fair use is also a very gray legal area. There are lawsuits all the time, and there's no clear definition of what is or is not.
We get into weird copyright places, like there are issues with musical copyright, and if you have X number of bars of a song or a certain tune, you can get in trouble for using that same like chord structure that another artist used. So then some guy said, hey, this is stupid. I'm going to have a AI, or not an AI, just like a deterministic algorithm, make every version of like a 4-bar set of chords or whatever it was, and just put that on the internet. and now it's all out there, and I'm making it freely available to everyone. Like, you could do that. There was whenever like the MPAA was really cracking down on pirating last time, they're starting to try it again, frankly, and there's very specific. We can get
you
into
wouldn't
that
download
next
a car, Daniel, would you?
Yeah, but like there was a DVD decryption key or something like that. Somebody cracked, and then that key just immediately got available to everyone. And people said, no, that number is illegal. You can't make a number illegal, especially because then someone found that same set of hexadecimal or whatever would be these digits of pi. You can't make part of a number, pi, illegal. And I think it's the same problem here. If you're going to say any amount of copyright at all, is it 2 words? Is it 5 words? Is it this length of thing? If it's granted an entire copyrighted book is used as part of the training data, sure, I think you should try and find and remove those things. But also, there's the entire internet effectively being used as the training data for these. And that would mean that it's effectively impossible to find and remove all of that. That doesn't mean that it's not still wrong or illegal. It just means that if that becomes law and enforced, we straight up can't do LLMs using basically all of the same data that we've already got.
Part of the current solution with our current legal structure is that the output of these models cannot be copywritten, and that sort of offsets yes, you may have ingested copywritten works, but your output is not commercial, can't be used. Well, it can be used commercially, but you can't protect the rights of that commercial usage.
We get back to the tool thing at that point. Are we going to have people that fight back and say, well, if you used Photoshop, you shouldn't be able to copyright it? If you used any machine learning anything, and then someone says like, oh, well, this algorithm that was used in the encoding of the final product uses some ML, technically, the entire thing is a moot point. I think people are going to be arguing the finer points of this for basically forever. And there's the obvious 99% of it of like, no, what I mean is the thing wrote something that is what shouldn't be able to be copywritten. But there's edge cases to the whole thing. It's all edge cases all the way down.
It recently came out that OpenAI, in their pursuit of Sora and just a better GPT model in general, has been ingesting a whole bunch of YouTube, which also kind of scares me because, like, do you watch a lot of YouTube? There's great stuff.
There's a lot of schlock out there.
But there's a lot of stuff that, like, really? Like, that's our training data?
There's a lot of illegally uploaded videos as well. I mean, like, straight up, here's a rip of Shrek or whatever. You can find those things, at least for a while.
Drop me that link afterwards.
Okay.
So apparently over 1 million hours of input. There was also a few weeks back, the CTO of OpenAI was on an interview and asked the question, are you guys ingesting any YouTube? And they played dumb. I'm like, I don't know. We do ingest from a lot of sources. And that was called out as what's going on there. And so anyways, they've now come out and fessed up that yes, over 1 million hours of YouTube videos was used as part of the training material. YouTube's calling foul, saying you did not have the rights to do that.
Same thing New York Times did. Same thing everyone else who's suing them says. Hey, we didn't give you permission to use this as training data.
The scraping argument that it's publicly available information.
Mm-hmm.
If a human could view it for free, then we can view it for free. And as of this moment, there are no rules about training on potentially copywritten.
Broadly speaking, I think I fall into the camp of if a human could view it for free, a thing that is trying to learn should be able to view it for free.
There are some other laws that potentially apply in the scraping space where basically like hacking laws, when you're using that much of someone else's resources, you can, and companies have used to try to go after.
Like you're accidentally DDoSing someone, you're using up a lot of their bandwidth. That has a material cost to them by degradation of their services. And then also we get into like the artistic, you should be, should the views count in terms of like giving money to the artists behind things? And then if so, should it just be YouTube that's paying them, or should OpenAI, if you can trace it saying this AI is learning from these people and there is a monetization scheme, they should be monetized for the work that they're using, or put a do not scrape on your thing. I think we'll probably, there's already some of that
there
on
is that in the robots.txt you can say, but there's lots of questions of, but is anybody like actually paying attention to it? And do they actually need to pay attention to it?
People ignore do not enter signs all the time.
Yes, people do ignore do not enter signs. There does seem to be more and more, call it rules on platforms about labeling data that's been generated by the AI. Not necessarily that you can't generate, but that you can't use it for training data, but there are rules that you can't leverage the output to then be displayed, that you need to put a label on it saying I generated content. Meta recently updated their policies to have a more direct made with AI label that's now required to be applied to images and videos and And again, we've seen and talked about these sort of same policies. I think we were talking about YouTube last week, requiring essentially the same thing, but at the same note, it's kind of unenforceable because how do you know? Prove it.
Yeah.
Prove it.
I think we're going to see prove it as kind of a crux of a lot of these legal cases, and I don't know what the heck we can all do about that.
In the government space, Kamala Harris recently announced some new policies on how federal agencies are using AI, and basically that they need to disclose what they're doing. And while I don't necessarily agree with those types of policies for a private company or a commercial company, for government, yeah, I think I do agree with it. Yeah, government, if you're going to be using AI, I would like you to disclose that. If you're using my tax dollars to do something, go ahead and tell me what you're actually doing. I don't see any. I guess what's the argument against it? The degree to which it potentially impedes innovation in this space because people are concerned about the public outcry over important government work being automated away through AI, which potentially they're now required to be more transparent about and previously could just do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of this will never see the light of day to people like us. It's all going to be internal. This memo was generated by AI going back and forth within the Department of Agriculture or the CIA or whoever. And maybe certain policies will have been written or punched up by AI. One of the things that was in the Harris announcement said that you'd have to have like a watermark, you'd have to have a risk assessment, the reasons behind the usage. I think the reasons are mostly going to come down to it made us able to do more stuff more faster. Okay, sure. But I don't think it's going to be like, here's our first contact plans. I think it's mostly going to be a bunch of the rote stuff that just makes the government run happening more or faster. We updated this 5-year-old set of documents with new dates, and we didn't need a person to do that. So much, I don't see this as shadowy cabal stuff. I see this as there is so much paperwork that just is effectively much of the body of the government that is constantly being rewritten and updated and passed back and forth. And maybe not all of that needs to be done by people anymore. And even if we don't do it that way, we should at least let people know it wasn't. And I am 1,000,000% behind that. I really think that that's a great idea. Let people know if AI was used for it.
Does the government official one day, is that a job that goes away?
Well,
I guess we need less government potentially.
But we're also going to make jobs. This is jobs being created by AI. There's going to be an AI chief officer for every government department. Granted, more jobs will be lost than created. But hey, put something under the jobs created side of the board.
I don't. If we remove more than we create, I'm not sure we're allowed to do that. Maybe. I guess on the flip side, Congress recently banned the use of ChatGPT-like solutions, or specifically Microsoft's Copilot. Although it's a little more nuanced than that, it seems to be primarily over security concerns of where their data might go. And I think they do acknowledge down the road that they do intend to bring those back. They just want to make sure that their data isn't being used as training data and it's not leaving the United States when it is fed as input into the models.
We did the exact same thing when we were working together. We started with, ChatGPT is a thing we can use, and then fairly quickly, stop, don't do that. Then the API was available, and the API, you can specifically sign up on the website and say, don't use this as training data. It's just sent back and forth and then not kept, and that was acceptable. It's the same sort of thing here, I think, where ChatGPT, anything that's put in there could be used. I think you actually have the checkbox there too now, but still, by default, they'll use anything that's put in there as training data in the future. And if it's internal Congress memos, maybe you don't want those necessarily popping up possibly all at once in an output when somebody does a jailbreak in the future. So I can totally see that being the case. Make sure that they're using the API instead. Make sure that anyone who's using it has to have the checkbox or have a black box, not actually connected to the real internet deployed solution for government. These kinds of things have happened a million times over.
Better journalists, better teachers, better artists, better government, better labels, all the great future that the AI will provide for us coming to a theater near you in the tomorrow. Probably tomorrow. I think that's going to do it for this episode 9. Before we get to our big 10 double digits next week, we will look forward to that. If you're not subscribed, you need to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Else, you won't know what's going to be happening and what you should think about it, and all of the wonderful nuances of our bright, beautiful future coming right at you. We're on pretty much every platform: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, wherever you might listen to a podcast, you can probably find us. And we'll be back next week with more. I'm Hunter Powers, and
I'm Daniel Bishop.
until next time.
They might be self-aware.